found this old courthouse steps quilt top in the corner of the attic, and it bridges years of memories. This quilt came from a 100-year-old scrap bag. Now you can tell because when you look on the wrong side, each block was built on a foundation piece, and this piece is from the 1800s, and the quilt maker hand-stitched the block. Now I think it's unique because she took a little nip right here in the center of the block. That nip is so she could position the center square on the opposite side. And then bridging a whole generation, this piece is from the 40s. Oh, maybe it's a feed sack, or perhaps it's a piece of dress material, and she machine stitched this block. Well, when you look at the front side, I suspect that this came from men's wool suits. It looks just like a wool suit. And this piece is possibly from a military uniform from World War I. Oh, it's just great. Possibly the quilt maker made it for her son just as he passed the bar. Well, do you have scraps? Do you have lots of scraps? Well, we don't want to wait 100 years to work with our scraps. Take a look at the quilt you can make with your scraps. There are no laws to follow on the random scrap quilt. That's the best part. Now you line up your scraps as if you were doing block one, and we sew this together in the lantern design. Just start out here with little pieces for centers. Oh, 3 inches are perfect. And then your white or your off-white with print on it will be A. B will be medium scale pastel prints. C and D are the darks. Oh, get those all lined up, and you must have a lot of scraps. Now take as many as you want. You can do assembly line sewing, but the more you change your fabrics and your scraps, the better. Okay, I'm just going to take this one. Since this is the longest one, this is actually my A. I'm just going to put it on the bottom, put my center square right sides to it, and then just start butting these right behind, one after the other. And the best part is that when you get to the end here, oh, you can just cut that one off, throw it back in the pile, and just keep on sewing right on down, adding all of your different pieces. And then once you've gone down the 2 sides, let's just go ahead. Oh, this one would look great. This is my B. So we're just going to open this up and place that center square. Gosh, that just about fits on there. Let's see if I just allow a little room right up there. This is your B underneath. And you just keep on working with your pieces. Cut them off if they don't quite work and add them on. Let's just go ahead and try these pieces and see if we didn't create that center. Now when you're working with a scrap quilt, oh my gosh, you could just jump up and down forever at your ironing board. So what I did was try to make it convenient for me. Just put a small mat right here. This is actually my travel iron, but it works well in a spot that you don't have a lot of room. This way you're not going to have to jump up and down all the time. So get it pressed, and then just you can turn your mat over, and this is versatile. This has a double use on it. Turn it over, and then now go ahead and cut your 2-inch segments. Let's see if I could just get this one cut. Oh, I didn't need to turn that around. How about I just use the grid? There's the salvage edge right there. So I'm going to make sure I miss that, cut that off, and go right along, getting all these 2-inch pieces. Oh my goodness, more scraps for the next quilt. Okay, that's the very center part of it. This is the A, this is the B. Go ahead and stack those up, turn them over. It's the same old thing. So then you're just going to grab up. Let me grab a couple of these, and I'll show you how you do it. Okay, let's just get started with this one right here and anchor it. Put your B at the top, just like I showed you. Line that up. And since you don't want to have too many blocks all the same, keep your scissors handy here. Trim that off. And then just butt on another color. Oh my, I'm not even looking to see which color I like here. But this is just a good old assembly line. You just keep on feeding them through, making sure that you have versatility each time, and build them from that center point out in that construction. Well, this one's the easiest one to do. You'll have a great time with that one, but let me show you a little bit more complicated one, the planned scrap. Let's move this away, pick up all of my letters here, and take a look at this. Now, the easiest way to work on it is if you work on just 4 blocks at a time. This hardly looks like 4 blocks, but it's a planning session. Right here you can see I planned the 4 fabrics that would go around the block. It's the A, the B, the C, the D. And we're actually doing like top, right, bottom, left. Now, the way this quilt works is that this piece right in the middle is shared by the 2 of them, so we can create a lantern. So I'll put 2 strips right there. You need 2 strips for the big lantern. You only need 1 strip out here for the smaller lanterns. And once you get those laid out, then go ahead again with those small center squares. Just drop those right in place like that. Well, we've got to start here, but the best way now is to just keep these in place. Keep them laying down so that you don't lift up these pieces and ruin your plan. So I'm just going to cut a little piece that would go right there, and over here on this side, I'm not going to lift it out of here till I know what I'm doing. Cut a little piece that'll go right here. So I'm creating that center. Here's the center here, here's the center here. Flip this one right sides together, flip this piece right sides together, and then I can assembly line sew them. There's not a lot of times you can assembly line sew through this. Let me line this edge up and just push these 2 right through like this. Now, that piece right in the center is a piece that these 2 share. So why don't we just do some assembly line. Grab up this piece right now. We can put it on the machine right side up. We could have cut it shorter if we wanted. Put this strip right sides to it. Oh, just working with these bits and pieces sure is different. But this right behind. Well, now we've got it on both sides. Back to this convenient pressing mat right here. Oh, I better flip it over. I'm going to iron on my cutting mat. That won't work. Okay, just flip it over. Go right down through here. Get those pressed flat. And then just turn them over. Cut them into the 2-inch segments. There's a little extra here. Always more so that you can square them off in between each one. So let's move this down right here. Cut this into 2-inch segments. Make sure that it stays square on that grid. Look at this piece. What looks like I didn't press it very straight underneath. That's really crooked. Hopefully when I open that up I can pull it down. Right here and right here. Now that the center is done, it's going to be a lot easier to build upon it. Right here, these 2 share this piece, but to make it easy now I have to put a piece on here and this piece on here. Well, once you build that whole center part of it, then it starts getting easier. Now you can start assembly line sewing strips, but you need to keep them all down flat on the table. Do your planning and get all of your assembly line sewing going. You're not going to believe what these pieces in this plan look like by the time they're all sewn. Let me just lay these out. You can see, oh, how pretty. These 2 share that piece right here. The blue share a piece and the peach share a piece. So get the 4 started, and then from that 4 you can just build out. Oh, make sure you have lots of room because scraps are endless. I love to play with scraps. I think I could play with scraps all day, but I've got to get my quilt top sewn together. Now this is the lantern's layout, 4 across and 4 down. I could barely fit it on my table, but I just want to show you how to flip the rows so you can do an assembly line step in this. Right here, this is row number 2. I'm going to flip it right sides together onto row number 1, and you work in pairs in this. So I'm just going to take the top block and stack it. They're in pairs. Oh, I've got that last two right in that stack. Now you work in pairs, you work in halves. This is rows 1 and 2, 3 and 4. You do exactly the same thing. Flip row 4 right onto row 3 and just stack it from top to bottom. So you've got the top up at the top. Oh, I'm lucky. I'm doing it right at the table. I won't twist them as I bring them to the sewing machine. Now, grab rows 1 and 2 already right sized together. Now, I will tell you, you might want to go ahead and do some pinning right here because there are seams that you need to match. So I just like to open them, look at them, roll them right sides together, get those lined up on the outside edge. Now, since this is the serger, you do need to keep your pins back out of the way. So just push them like this near that seam and keep them away from the seam so your knife doesn't cut into it. Well, now let's get the outside edges lined up. Oh, it's still that same 1/4 of an inch, 15 stitches to the inch, and you just hold down those seams as they were pressed in the block. Now, after you go over that one seam, go to the opposite end, go ahead, open them, roll them. If you prefer, put a pin right there so that as you roll these together, you get those lined up. Boy, I'm so good at finger pinning. I just like to hold them tight and sew across. Now, you just keep on going right down. Good old assembly line order. That's the best part of this. Get this seam lined up here, roll it together, and you just keep on going from top to bottom in these vertical rows. Let me see if I can get at least this one done. And you have this whole big chain that you create. Now, you don't clip the threads apart that hold them together. I'm going to do one more because it's just like putting pins in these rows. Match this one up. Oh gosh, if you were doing a big quilt, you would have several pairs of rows going the whole way across here. Squeeze it together. Because we worked in pairs, you do the vertical rows first. Let's just pretend that I'm down at the bottom of that vertical row. And you just go ahead. Oh, where did those scissors go? I know they're here someplace. Does that happen to you? Your stuff just gets away from you. Now, you have big long rows like this, and you want to go the short rows. So you just open them up, check at them. Boy, now's the time. If there's a mistake, you better take it out right now. It's much easier. Make sure it's correct. Then just flip it right sides together. And at this seam, right here where we're joined by the thread, that's why you like to put that thread right there. Hold on to it. Your seams go in opposite directions. Line that up, look at it, roll it right in, and make your seams go in opposite directions. And then as I go right down through this row, I always like to keep the row I just sewed on the top over to the side so I can take a look and not twist the seams on this. Now you make the 2 halves in this quilt, maybe 3 pairs, 3 rows of pairs. Sew those together, and then all that's left is the borders. Well, I think I'll just get this top together and I'll show you how to add the borders. The ruling is in. You have to use the same fabric for your first border as you used in your center square. Well, I have all of these purple strips, and boy, you remember they were all short strips, so I need to sew them together into long strips. Oh, you'd probably have to do that anyways, especially for a larger quilt. But all you do to assembly line sew strips together for either borders or for binding, you just put 2 pieces right sides together, sew that short end, and then as soon as you sew one short end, you take the top strip, you curve it around, so you have the right side up, take the next piece, put it right sides to it, and you just chain right through there. It's a little hard to tell because you can't see which is my right side and my wrong side. Actually, I'm not sure myself. I just want to put this into one long strip. But see how you just keep on doing a loop system, assembly line sewing, until you have great big long chains that look like this. Then you just go back through, cut those right on those seams. You've got long strips for borders. Press the seams to one side and then lay out your quilt top. Oh, I love the way this is going together. Now, make sure that you lay 2 borders. I have 2 border pieces on top of each other, laid right down through the center of my quilt. Nice and flat. The quilt is definitely flat. The way I like to do it is allow 2 extra inches on the opposite end. Right here, I'm just going to use the grid, use the ruler, get that lined up. So I trim that off. So there's 2 extra inches. Oh, that looks good. Now, I'm going to take these borders and pin them right sides together to the sides, but I'm going to allow an extra inch on each end. Let's see if I can go ahead, line this up right here. Because you know, sometimes whenever you sew these on and fold them out and trim them, you don't trim your corners square. Oh, I'm going for square corners. So position it like this so you have that extra inch on that end. Make sure it's laying flat. Get it pinned right in the center. Oh boy, nothing better than having a quilt that's going to lay flat on you. Let me see if I can go ahead and turn this one. So I've got that extra inch. Line that up on the grid. Allow that to hang over. That looks perfect like that. Just put your pin right in there and then pin it flat all along down through the border. You can pin the opposite way if you're just using a regular sewing machine. This way you're not going to get any stretching in your borders. That is hard to do, you know, if you get stretching in your borders. The only thing you really can do is use a very thick batting, and that'll take it away. Okay, pull out your pins as you come along. You can sew with either your quilt top on the top or your border on the top, whichever you like. Hopefully your seams are just laying nice and flat underneath, but just zoom right down along this strip. Let's just go ahead and pretend that I've gone the whole way. Oh, there's not that much more. Gosh, let me just step on the gas and I'll get right down there. This is the beauty of the using the serger, and especially because there's a differential feed on it, and it feeds the layers of fabric together so you don't get that stretching in the borders. All right, see? Thought I wasn't going to have enough time to go the whole way down, and I did. Okay, now, once you've got borders on 2 sides, we've got that extra inch. See if I can just go ahead and press this, set the seam and press it so that seam is behind the border. Make that smooth as you can. And then see how you have that extra out there? Well, all you've got to do is just go ahead with your rotary cutter, and you could use a 12-inch square up ruler to get that as straight even into the corners. Line that up on the seam. Got that border hanging out there, and just trim off that extra inch. Oh, that should be as square as can be. Well, let me finish my borders and I'll show you how to layer your quilt. There is justice. I'm nearly done with this quilt. Oh, I'm getting excited. Now, I worked on a larger table and did all of my layering. This is what I did. First, I took my backing fabric, and if it has a right and wrong side, you put it right side down. Then you put your batting on top with your quilt on top of that, and you smooth all those layers together so they're completely flat. And then, so you can pin it without puckers, you clamp it all around the outside edge of the table. Now, this is what my batting looked like. Actually, I like cotton batting, 100% cotton. I like the natural fibers. Remember the older batting I showed you? This is what the cotton batting looks like today. Very thin, perfect for machine quilting. And another natural fiber that's just great is this wool. I've washed a quilt with this wool in it. Oh, it is wonderful. It stays soft. It's bonded so it doesn't fall apart. Now, man-made fibers are the polyester fibers. You can see there's 2 different thicknesses here. The thinner one is perfect for machine quilting. This thicker one might be for when you'd like to tie your quilt. Actually, I think children like this because you get a lot of depth and dimension in your batting. So you'll just have to decide which batting you like. I prefer the natural fibers. Now, we've got to do some marking on this quilt, and you can decide, do you want to do stair-step quilting or straight line quilting? Well, the easiest quilting is the straight line, and so I'm just going to show you that. Now take your 6 by 24 inch ruler and take a Hera marker for lighter fabrics. It doesn't show up so well on this one, so I've chosen to use this yellow chalk liner. Now when you do straight line quilting, you just go ahead and put a diagonal line. Let's see if I can get this lined up right. I want to take it right through the center of the square and line it up so that I start out here and just go right down through. Oh, that's lining up pretty good. Okay, with a 6 by 24, you want to do your pinning afterwards, but I did get started on my pinning. But you do this before you pin so you can draw those continuous lines. Oh, that shows up pretty good. Then you just turn it this way. Let's see if I can line that up. This is definitely the easiest way because you don't have to do all of that twisting and turning. Now, if you're going to do stair-step quilting, it's a stitch in the ditch technique, and you don't really need to mark it because you just follow the lines in the fabric. That takes a little bit longer. Well, why don't we just pretend I finished my machine quilting and go on to the binding. I already pieced my binding into a long strip. It's all ready for sewing. 3-inch long strip I pieced together and I folded so that the wrong side is in the inside. Oh, this is my favorite kind of binding. I decided to use a contrast color to the border of my quilt. Now take your binding and just start right in the middle of one side. I'm going to start closer to a corner because I think the sides are easy. It's the corners that are the tricky part. Okay, so I like to just continue using my walking foot because I've got all my layers here. Why not? And you just use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Still use that same long stitch to go through all those thicknesses. And just, I tend to hold my binding a little tight so that I don't have some stretching in the binding. Okay, we are nearly here. Gosh, I told you you've got to have an energetic day. Okay, now as you come into this corner, leave your needle in the same distance as your seam allowance. And then just turn it to the next side. And right at this side, drop your presser foot, back stitch off of it. And then on this corner, lift this straight up and carefully fold in that diagonal. It's got to be a perfect angle right there. Once you fold that in, then just go and fold it straight back down so that the edge lines up with the edge of the binding and the quilt. And then you just take off sewing again, going the whole way around. Oh, let me just go a couple of more inches, and then I'll show you how I like to finish that corner. Okay. Once you get back to where you started, I do an overlap stitch and make a seam right there so I can sew the seam and have a completely flat finish on it. Okay, trim right now. I don't like to trim away my backing and my batting until this step. And every time I do this, I shudder right here at this corner. I go, oh, please, Elle, don't cut off that corner right now. But you trim your batting and your backing right up to that edge. And here, when you pop this around, that should be a perfect miter right under there. Oh, look at that. That's perfect. Now, from the wrong side, you go ahead and tuck that edge over and you cover that previous line of stitching. Now, I used to spend a lot of time safety pinning. I pinned for hours. I'd have a whole caseload of pins in there. And then I found out thread fuse would really do it well. Fusing thread. So now this is what I like to do, especially since I like to use cotton batting. I just take this. This is what thread fuse looks like. And instead of putting it in my bobbin, all I do is just lay it right along that seam there. And bring this around. Your iron's got to be hot. And fold that over and hold the iron on it about 30 seconds. Steam is just fine. Oh, I saw the end of that thread fuse just shrink right up. Now it works great on cotton batting, but I'd stay away from polyester batting because when you put an iron on polyester batting, then you just completely just shrink that batting right up there. Let me go around this corner right here. See if I can tuck in a nice tuck right there. Oh, fold that down a little bit. Just keep on going. Oh, I could do better on that corner, but I'll just go ahead and show you. Just keep your iron out on the edge. 30 seconds, you have to be patient on it, just to hold that thread fuse in place. And then once you fuse that down, then you can go ahead from this side and go back and stitch in the ditch all around the outside edge. Well, the verdict is in. The Courthouse Steps is a beautiful, easy quilt to make. So you have a great time making your quilt.